Okay, and here we are again, and now what we're going to do is we're going to finish the lamp model by putting it into layout and establishing a hierarchy of the layers so that they will move in relation to each other and be what's called parented to each other in the right order. So if we're here in layout, I'm going to go ahead and load that object, and that's right there on the desktop, the desk lamp. And so then, as you can see, there it is. And I'm just going to stay in, for the moment, I'm going to stay in the perspective view and do everything here. So the first thing we want to do is we want to look at the joints of the lamp. We want to be able to move this joint the way you would expect it to move. And I'm going to show you now that initially it's not going to work. So if I go to modify, and first of all, one more thing, all of these things can be selected differently. That's the shade, that's one cross piece, that's another one, and so forth. And if you were to accidentally move this at this point, you would see that it would take the desk apart. So we want to do a few things here. We want to establish what the layers are. Now remember, if we go down to this little button here, which is almost impossible to see, you'll see that those are where all the layers are. Now there's one other thing that we probably should have done, which we can rectify relatively quickly. If you go back into Modeler, and it doesn't really matter where we are in Modeler, if we go to the Windows tab and we go to the Layers panel, you can also get that by hitting F7, you'll notice that all of these layers in the Layers panel are unnamed. So if I highlight the first one, you see that we see only the desk. So if I rename that, if I double click on that, I'm going to call that desk and say OK. This one would be the base. This one, I'm going to call that arm 1. And this one would be arm 2. And then of course we got the shade. And finally we got the bulb. And that's going to be a whole lot easier to deal with than trying to remember the numbers. So then, if I make sure I save that. So then if I'm back in here and I open up that Layers panel, you'll see that they are now properly named. So we'll leave that over here because we're going to use it from time to time. And the first thing I want to do is I want to select the shade, which you can see is selected there. Now, if I were to try to rotate the shade, you will see that it doesn't move it all the way we would want it to. So I'm going to Control Z that. So what I want to do is I want to make it rotate the way it's supposed to. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to go to over here under the Modify tab, and I'm going to move Pivot. If I click on that, there you see we have the three-dimensional guidance, and I'm going to put the pivot right up where that hinge is supposed to be. And I can make sure that I'm in the right area there. And I'm going to say that that's right. If it's not right, it's close. So then if I rotate the shade, now suddenly it rotates where it's supposed to. So what I want to do is I want to move the bulb with it. And that's a lot easier than it sounds. To do that, what I have to do is to parent the bulb to the shade. And so the way I do that is I go into the Windows area here and I choose Motion Properties. And there you see, right now the shade is selected, and I'm going to select a parent for it. So actually I got to do this backwards. I have to select the bulb, and I have to parent it to the shade. So there's that. So now, you'll notice the shade rotates down there, which we could bother to fix, but we don't have to, because now if we just select this once again and I move it, and it'll be easier to see if I go here, you can see that the bulb is going with it. Get the right axis there. So that's fine. And so then the question is, how do we get the shade and the bulb to move in relation to this arm, which is actually not hard at all. So what I would do is I would select the shade, which it is, and I'm going to parent that to arm 2. Parent item would be arm 2. So now that that's done, if I select arm 2, you'll notice once again the pivot point is way the heck down there, which wouldn't make any sense. So I'm going to move pivot, and I'm going to move the pivot point right up to where that joint is there. So if we look at this, you can see that that's pretty close. And if we have to, we can just scoot it in just a touch, and I would say that's just about right. So then, if we then rotate arm 2, how's that? It takes the lamp with it. Okay, so the next one is we'll go for this, and we're going to parent that to arm 2. Nope, wrong one. We're going to parent this to arm 1. So arm 1 is now the parent to that. So, and once again, if we move the pivot point, we can then move that in relation to the base. This one may take a little bit more. Bring that in right along that line there and scoot it in right in between those two. So if we look at that, oh, went too far. If we look at that, grab the blue line, bring it back some, grab the red line, bring it in, and we want that right along where that joint would be. Okay, so therefore, if we rotate this, and you know what? I'm going to bring that up a little bit. Move pivot, and somehow it seems to have gotten, okay, so there, bring it up just a little bit so that it's around there. And one more check. Oh, this can take a little bit of time. So then, let's say that that's good enough. So now if we rotate this, we can see that the whole lamp goes with it, and the pivot point basically looks believable. And I'm just going to bring that, I know I'm being a perfectionist here, I'm going to bring that up a little bit so that it looks more like the hinge is attached. Yeah, that would actually, that's good enough. Okay, and so then basically all we do next is we parent that to the base. So if I go to the base, and so then if I select the base, and in this particular case I don't have to move the pivot point, but it might be easier to. So I'm going to move the pivot, and I'm just going to put it right along in the center, like so. And that should do nicely for now. Okay. Next we'll talk about doing the shading. Okay, so now when we talk about the shading, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. Now first of all, the lamp is functional, and we can go ahead and position it a little bit better. Let's say we want to give it that casual look. So bring it like that, and let's say we want to do like that, let's say. And let's say we even want to put it out there some. Okay, so if we go into our surface editor, we can start by doing the body. And so the body is a white color. And what I want to do, let's make this a blue lamp. I've always liked blue. So the lamp is blue, and we're going to give it some specularity and turn on smoothing. And so we have a certain amount of gloss to that. And I'm actually going to leave the glossiness relatively low, but bring it up maybe a little bit so it looks kind of like metal, kind of like painted metal, enamel colored. And then we'll go ahead and take the shade, and we'll make the shade roughly the same color, blue, and smooth that as well. And give that some specularity and a little bit of glossiness there as well. And there we go. So let's see how that would, okay, so let's also look at the camera position. If I go to camera view, that's what the camera is seeing. So I select camera down here, and I'm going to move in on this scene here. And I'm actually going to look at this from a slightly different angle. I'll get that light out of there. And I'm also going to take my shade and I'm going to rotate it towards me a little bit so that we can see that light bulb. And let's go ahead and back to camera. Let's see how that would render out. So there is our render of the lamp. And you can see that the lamp body itself looks pretty good, and the shadows are making a certain amount of sense. And so let's then look at the table and the light bulb. Okay, for the table surface, that would be the desk, or table rather. I'm going to give that a simple texture here, and I'm going to load the image of wood. And I'll put that on the y-axis, or maybe it needs to be the x-axis. Hit automatic sizing. Try the y-axis again. The y-axis actually looks pretty good, although you'll notice in this case we can't do it as a planar because we did give it some depth. If we were zoomed in further we wouldn't see that. I'm going to change that to cubic. If I put on cubic it makes more sense. So let's go ahead and go with that. And I'm not going to bother giving that a bump map, but what I am going to do with the light bulb, go to surface editor, with the bulb I'm going to give that some luminosity so the bulb looks like it's on. I'm also going to turn on smoothing, and there we go. So let's see what that would render out as. Okay, so we see here that the glossiness works, and if we look at the image as a whole, it's not so bad. The lamp looks pretty realistic. The only thing we're not seeing is the path of the light. The light is glowing, but it isn't really giving off any light. So that's what we're going to address briefly in this next segment. To do that, let us go ahead and establish a light. Now we haven't talked about lights yet. They're under items, and if we go under lights, we see that I'm going to put a spotlight in there. So if I put a spotlight in, and I'm just going to call that desk lamp. If I create a desk lamp, there it is. So as you can see, the way spotlights work, and they operate just like any other object. If I go into modify and I rotate, I can see that the spotlight comes with that beautiful little set of rays. And so what I want to do is I want to match that to what I think the light is doing. So if I move that in a little bit, and I'm just going to stick that up into the light. If I go back into perspective view, you can probably get a better look at what's going on. It's a little bit off center, so I put that in a little bit, let's say. Maybe it needs to be rotated just a little bit. And let's see what that does. Oh, maybe a little too much. So bring that back in a little bit so that it works that way. And make sure that it's... I would say that that is just about right. So if I go into my properties panel here, I can see that the angle down here, I can adjust that. And notice how the light fans out as a result. I'm just going to put that about like that. So if we do that, you see right now the light still isn't there, even though when we adjusted the light it looked like it was supposed to be. And that is because the light is inside the sphere and the sphere is blocking it. So what we're going to do is, all we're going to have to do is go back into Modeler, and when we select the actual light bulb, make sure we're in polygon mode. I'm going to select the light bulb. I'm going to hit the F key and turn it inside out so it has no inside. And then if we save the object and try rendering it again, and as you can see, now we have the light spot. And so what we can do is we might want to fan that out a little bit because it looks a little bit too narrow. So let's say that I go back into properties for the light, and let's say I go ahead and fan that out like so. And let's say we give it a little bit softer angle there. And let's see what that does. And we can see that that looks a lot more normal. We can also do one other thing. We can boost the intensity of the light. So if we go to our light properties again, all we got to do is basically turn up the light intensity to a full. And try again. Okay, and if we look at this, we can see that it is working quite well. Okay, so the only thing we have left to do now is to parent the lamp to the lamp so that it will move with it. And so what we're going to do then is we're going to go to the Windows area and go to Motion Options, or hit M, and then we're going to select the light, and we're going to parent that item. And we're going to go ahead and parent that to the shade. That'll probably be the easiest way to do it. And so then once that is established, then if we were to go into Modify, Rotate, and we were to select the shade, you'll see that the lamp moves with the shade. Now that's done, we're going to demonstrate virtual progressive render. And you see if we go up here to the texture shade area, we're going to switch that down to VPR, which gives you this. And you might remember that this essentially renders as you go along. So if I have the shade selected and I go to rotate, and it's hard to establish the correct pivot point if you can't see it, but we're going to try anyway. You can see there that the light is actually moving with the shade. And it might be easier if we were to rotate this one. You see that the shade follows it. And so essentially we have halfway decent desk lamp.